good morning to you. It seems that Donald Trump is now fully in campaign mode with his first rally since that assassination attempt last week, endorsed as the official Republican presidential candidate now. How do you compare Donald Trump, the Donald Trump that's being presented now, compared to the Donald Trump we saw last time he ran for president?
Well, he has more experience. He understands how government works much better now. One of the issues with the first presidency of his is that they got into office and he didn't really quite understand things. You know, for example, he thought he was going to take all of Obama's staff. He was surprised when he found out that they left with Obama. And I think he's more experienced. They have probably a better plan of what they're going to do. That's my hunch, is the big difference.
Right, and with all that experience, you know, there does seem to be more of a subdued Trump that we're seeing on the stumps at the moment. It's less bellicose, it seems.
Well, at the moment, I think when you watch the RNC acceptance speech, aside from being extremely long, the first 30 minutes were quite good, but he just couldn't stop himself from getting on and going on about, on his typical stump speech. His typical stump speech is pretty fire and brimstone in many ways. And we'll see if he can keep the subdued stuff, because generally, if you want to nerd out about like the way political science looks at stuff, is that typically when you get the nomination, you swing on one side or the other, and then in order for the general election, you tend to move towards the center. I think that's what he's doing now to try to make appeal to more of the moderates and the swing voters and conservative Democrats. We'll see if it holds.
Donald Trump had said that he would only detail the events of last week, the assassination attempt, once during the Republican National Convention because it was too painful for him to speak about. We heard him speak about it in detail again this morning at that presidential rally. What do you make of the way he is framing that assassination attempt?
Well, he is, bluntly milking it for all it's worth. He's got a great sympathetic story that makes him a very sympathetic character. You know, no president or former president should ever be assassinated. And that was an awful thing that happened. And I think everybody on both sides of the aisle agree with that. And I think he also loves to tell stories. He loves to cast himself as the hero in any story. He likes to be the center of attention. And he gets to cast himself as the hero here. So I think that's what's going on.
It is interesting, isn't it? And America does love a hero. They love a comeback hero, particularly. You know, to quote Donald Trump in this recent rally, he said, "I took a bullet for democracy." Is that going to be enough? Perhaps that's all right for his base, but is that going to be enough to persuade the swing voters?
I don't think so. I mean, the reality is that the general American voter has probably the memory of fruit flies at times. And we are still several months out from the election. And a lot of the base for both parties has long ago decided who they're going to vote for. And there are some people in the middle, and we'll see if he can pull them towards his side. But the reality is that the Democratic Party has a lot of open questions right now. And depending on how those questions fall out, I think is going to affect what you asked.
When you look at the rhetoric from the Trump campaign, how do you compare it to what we're seeing in terms of the rhetoric from the Biden camp?
Well, I wrote a book on how Donald Trump uses professional wrestling language. And if you watch that convention, it was basically a wrestling performance. He loves to use hyperbolic language. He likes to overstate things. He likes to cast things as good guys and bad guys, and how he's an aggrieved victim. You know, he loves to take credit for everything, and he never ever admits fault. That is classic wrestling tropes, professional wrestling, that is. And he also, within wrestling, there's this thing called tabula rasa, which means reset, blank slate. He kind of believes once the storyline's finished, he resets and he can, and he's not responsible for the past stuff that happened. You see all that playing out. The Democratic Party does not entertain in the same way. I guess if you want to put it in, Trump is offering people sugary, fun cereal, and the Democrats are offering bran flakes.
Right, let's focus on the Democrats. There's a lot of disunity within the Democrats at the moment. At least it's playing out in the media when it comes to whether Joe Biden should be stepping away from this White House. How much do you think this disunity within that party may get swing voters to say, well, to look at the Republicans and say, well, at least they've got their game together and they seem to know what they're doing?
I think it'll matter some, but one of the things about voters in America is the Republican voters have a tendency to hold their nose and vote for their candidate, no matter whether or not they like them or not. The Democrats have a habit of crossing their arms and staying home if they don't like the candidate. And Joe Biden, if he stays as the candidate, needs every vote he can get. He needs the young voters. He needs the swing voters. He needs everybody to come out. And that's the problem that the Democratic Party has, is that there's a candidate that a lot of the Democratic Party doesn't want anymore. They're saying, we want somebody else. And if they don't have somebody else, they might stay home. And that's the worst possible thing for it.
Shannon Bow O'Brien, Associate Professor at the University of Texas in Austin, thank you so much for being with us today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.